without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker for the first session. He earned his doctor's degree in zoology at the University of Singapore. And although he was originally a trained marine biologist, his dynamic personality enabled him to expand his expertise to include marine pollution and coastal and marine management. He has extensive professional experience in research, policy development, management, and training and education. He also authored over 200 articles and reports. His careers can be traced back over 35 years in East Asia, serving in various capacities in international and UN organizations. When PEMSEA started as a regional marine pollution project in the region, he was appointed as the regional program manager and subsequently the first regional program director of PEMSEA when it gains its legal personality in 2006. We are very honored in welcoming our inaugural lecturer for this lecture series. So join me in welcoming Dr. Chua Chaeng, PEMSEA Chair Emeritus.
Thank you very much. I do not expect to be invited. I thought I have retired and completely go to rest. So I have not been lecturing since the pandemic, and therefore this times I have to begin the old days, and I hope my memory will not fade away that fast. I still can recollect something. So today's topics that I'm going to introduce to you is, I understand that many of our participants are now getting involved into this approach of environmental management, especially now you have new projects on marine plastics or things of this nature. And I think this is something that you want to ask yourselves, why do you want to come and attend the lectures on integrated coastal management? What is that for? But this is exactly a situation I would like to introduce to you. When I get involved in the marine pollutions and being the one who try to persuade people to address these type of issues, there are many problems that we have faced. And many of these issues could not be addressed just from a policy or just come out with an international convention. They are all on the top. But to really make it work, it would take some time, some special effort. And I thought it would be about time I also introduced these subjects. Why do we change it from a direct approach in addressing the issues to a more comprehensive approach to do this? Now, I will talk about it when it comes to the question of sustainable development. But what I'm going to say today is, we have seen after almost 30 years of efforts, we begin to see that the people are getting more and more interested to apply the approach and the management regime to regulate and really address these very important issues of the world today. And therefore, in my lectures, I will go very briefly to discuss about the basic elements that we must bear in mind, whether you are administrators or whether you are policymakers or implementers on the ground. I think we all have to share a common knowledge of what the world is today. So I will start off by presenting a series of slides, but I want to highlight one point, is that I use the title Local Solutions to Global Sustainable Development Agenda. Because why do I use the word local solutions? See, since 1972, when we first started the Sustainable Development Conventions, we agreed to adopt sustainable development activities, but we have not seen any actions that have been taken to really see what sustainable development is. I mean, I can ask everybody now, can you show me a place where you call it, this is an example of sustainable development? Very difficult, because most of the people just try to meet some of the goal. But to do all this, you need a very special approach. But the mechanism for a local action is not there. Now, that is why, through all these efforts that we are doing now, is to encourage local governments to take initiative, the local effort being undertaken, and you are the one who can solve most of the problems. And we can prove that over these years that this has happened. So that's why I'm tying the local efforts and sustainable development together. All right, and this is in answering the international efforts to address sustainable development goal. And through sustainable development goals, we will be able to address many of the concerns that we are talking about: pollution problems, resources depletion problem, environmental degradation problems. All these could be addressed together within a smaller landscape, and we can achieve the result faster. So I hope one day, before I leave this world, we'll be able to see something. See? So I would also include in this discussion maybe some of the stories over the years, how this has been evolved. Okay, may I have next slide? So the key topics I want to discuss will be, number one is to talk about the importance of aquatic ecosystem, see their services and threats. Now, this is a very simple thing, but I think you need that basic information to convince many of the policymakers, many of the high-ranking people, the politicians, why you need to go into these efforts. Number two is to talk about sustainable development agenda and integrated coastal zone management, coastal management. You see, the sustainable development agenda is very commonly understood by most people now, governments as well as the practitioners, people talking about how to reach sustainable development goal. But there's still a lot are still at the talking level. Now, the next one I'm going to go through more detail a little bit is the ICM operational modality. How do we develop ICM, and how this ICM can be implemented, and how can we address issues that you are facing it? So as a local government official, you are facing the real world. So how do you tackle them? So this is something I thought we would be able to discuss this. And finally, I will just give a very brief introduction of the ICM practices in the East Asian Sea regions. Now, I must highlight that over these 30 over years of my involvement in this, I'm very proud to say that this region actually have demonstrated a solution problems that an effort that many other parts of the world is still beginning to follow. So let us have confidence and we move forwards together on this. Next. Now, after my lectures, I hope you will be able to understand why we have to apply ICM. Okay, does it really work? Now, I had given a talk in West Africa many years ago, and talking to the African students, the government officials, the problem that we are facing, how we solve it, and one of the participant gave me the answer. The answer is, it's too good to be true. So I hope it won't come to be that it's too good to be true. But there's a lot of obstacles, a lot of problems. But how do we face it? Next is you want to also know, how does it work? Who should be involved? How long does it take? Okay, who and how should it be financed? This is the most important thing, that many people started off say, oh, no money, we cannot do anything. But how to find money? That is a key. And I think that is an important point of how, as a coastal managers, how do you able to attract funding to support your work? Now, next is that who are the benefit? What are the benefits that we get, and where does the benefit go to, and most importantly is, how do you sustain these benefits after you have achieved something? how to sustain it, okay? And finally, you have to understand the obstacle that you will be meeting. So these are the basic things when you go through the training, the lectures, try to ask some of these questions. How do you solve all this problem? And these are practical problems that we have to face it day to day. Next, please. Okay, I will not go into too much detail, but there are some facts that we have to know about aquatic ecosystems. Its importance, its services, and it's the threats that we're facing. So next, it's a simple, very simple thing for us to understand. First of all, is what is the importance of inland ecosystems? You see, now we just have to recollect why inland ecosystem is so important. Why not only the sea? Okay, but here I would like to highlight the point is that you must realize that only 3% of the earth water, is fresh water. In other words, we only have 3% of the existing water available, and of which you can see that only 2.5% are already being stored in the glaciers, in the Arctic, in Antarctic, and only 0.5% of this fresh water that is available for our human consumption, for our usage, for irrigation, for all these things. So in other words, fresh water is a very precious thing, but we take for granted that this is something, is by nature, you can have it. But actually, we have very little of this. And the moment this amount of water is contaminated, where do you get your water? See? So this is something I hope it will remind us that ecosystem is very important because it provides that type of support that we need. Now, of the 0.5%, they were distributed in a different number of ways. Of course, they are stored, in the aquifers. They are found in the rivers and all those things, right? Next slide. Okay, the next question is, how important are the coastal areas? Okay, so we cannot go and handle the world, but the coastal areas is important because it is a major areas where the human beings are located. Probably more than 10% of the world population are living along the coast. So it's very big. And in this part of the world, we probably have 90%, So there's a lot of people living along the coast. And many of the countries in Asia a lot of people living 10 meters away from the sea level area. So in other words, when you have a major flood, many places in Asia will be flooded. I used to walk around in the coast of Sri Lanka, in some of these areas, you will see that the people are living along the river bank. And this is very, very serious. The moment you have a change of water level, they got wiped out. So we have to be aware of the distribution. And because of the big populations that are living along the coast, so we have to make sure that every bit of the coastal areas are well managed. Next, please. Now I talk about the importance of oceans. The ocean, of course, is much bigger than the freshwater, bigger than the coastal areas, right? It covers 71% of the Earth's surface, you see. But it provides 99% of the Earth's habitats. So don't forget that we depend very much on our supply of food, the services, all coming from the oceans. So the ocean is equally important, but it's so big, we may not be able to handle that. It regulates our weather, and therefore our climate change regulations through heat transfer, all these things need to be understood as we start doing the management side of it. And one element that we have to remember that the clean ocean is important because it generates the oxygen that we breathe, you see. So we have water from the inland estuarine area, but we have the oxygen from the sea that is generating. So we see all these are related to our livelihood. Okay, next, please. So we have to realize the value and the good and service generated by the aquatic ecosystem. This is a very important thing that we will know that it gives you a direct value. Direct value is in the form of providing food, fresh water, woods and fiber, and also fuel, all these things that we get from the sea. Okay, but it also have a very important indirect role, and this indirect role that they are playing is supporting the nutrient cycles of the sea. It creating the soil formations, and it also be responsible for the primary productions that we're having. So these are the issues that we have to see the contribution, and it also have a very important regulatory functions of the world climates and all these things. So this is something that we have to make sure that the oceans is also properly managed, in such a way that we have to regulate ensure that the climate regulations, all this flood that has been creating, they all have related to the nature. So these are issues that we have to really look at it. And more importantly, we should not forget is the biodiversity that we get from the sea, which is also very big. So the seas, the oceans, and the coast are basically very important. Next. So it's simple. It provides us the air, the water, and the food. So these are the ecosystem that give us these basic requirements of humankind. And if we are not able to manage it carefully, we are the one who lose. Okay. Next, please. So I would like to go to the next things that I believe the importance of coast, aquatic habitats, and the oceans are well understood by most people, in our daily life. We know this already. But when we come to sustainable supply of ecosystem services, what are the challenges? How do you make sure that the aquatic ecosystems are able to continue provide you the services that they have been offering? Okay. Now, that is something that we have to think about. First of all, is for us to understand, and this is the beginning of us to look into why we want to manage the coast. Now, you look at the coast and the seas near the shore. This is a common things where multiple activities occurred in this region. Not only the seas, not only have shipping, you have also exploitations, you have mining, you have fishing, all sorts of activities, aquaculture. Now, all these things are found along the coastal areas, very close to the shore. And then in the upland there, you have the river system. And our river systems, all in most countries of the world, especially in Southeast Asia, our river is degrading. They are destroying, and they have been utilized. The river bank has been cleared, So all this has created a hell of a problem that we will have to address. Now you can see from here that we also have uplands. So when people are cutting trees uplands, we never realize that it's have impact on the lower ground or the lower areas. So how do you now manage this? So here it tells you a very important thing. If you really want to address the issues, a simple issues of pollution, you have to have a broad view of what's happening around you. All right? You cannot simply say, okay, we have now a plastic problem, let us address the plastic problem alone. You can't. You have to look into other aspects, and how do you able to regulate, to manage in such a way that these issues can be addressed. Okay? And I have in the past a lot of experience when I first started. I was so much enticed by all these requirements to do oil pollution. That time, oil pollution is a major issue. Anytime you have oil pollution, The whole countries are in panic, so you have to now address it. Of course, with the oil companies, they have been very cooperative, and they are working very well on this. And this is one of the reasons why, in the past, the way we address the pollutions, the oil spill, is control the vessels, and make sure they don't spill. But how can you make sure that the ship don't spill? No, there's a lot of problems around that. But when you clean up the whole area, it will take a few more years to recover. But that's the end. Everybody think that you have solved the problem already, but it's not. It's not part of the overall issues that we are facing. That's why when we are going into the deeper part, looking in a general thing, when we look into the Strait of Malacca, I think James probably know that, is that we go into a spatial project known as Marine Electronic Highway, to get all the information and be able to really treat the subjects more holistically. Okay, next one. Now, in recent years, as we know, that the ocean economy means that the countries in the regions are already starting to take as much from the sea as possible in terms of productions, in terms of getting the services. So as a result, our terrestrial economy has been expanded to cover now the marine economy. So you have more shipping, mining, all sorts of activities, sand mining, and all these things are coming out, farming, and marine habitat exploitation. All these add up. Of course, you have an increase in economy. At the same time, it also benefit you because the country say, okay, I have created a lot of jobs. But as we start exploiting the seas, we begin to see also new problems, because this also imposes on a pressure on the ecosystem, and we never say how much can the sea sustain. Everybody was thinking the sea is so big, what is there to worry about, So we are now already start facing the reality that what we are doing, exploiting, is not what we think, that the sea will just nicely keep on generating the needs that you require. So you can see that although it has helped in increasing the job generations, it has helped in increasing your economy, but it is still a problem that we have to face. Next, please. Now, you look at the slides. The red, the green color are all cargo ship. And you look at the tanker, they are all in red. Then you look at the brown one, the fishing vessel. So you look at the Southeast Asian seas alone, you can see how much the sea has been utilized. You can't even find a place for navigation, all right, if you start looking into all this together. Now, how many of you imagine the seas that we are now living are so complicated, so clustered with all these activities? When did we start thinking of we should solve all this problem? We should plan it. If we have planned it, it will never be like this. All right. So here is an example that things always happen first, and then we find solution later. Now what we are trying to do in the future is try to prevent this thing to happen. Okay. Next. Now, if you look at the situation now, the triangle offshore production sites, you can see this is an area where the countries are exploiting the oil. They do a lot of oil exploitations, and you will see also the refinery set up all over in Southeast Asia. There are plenty of this, right? Now, with the oil exploitations, with the shipping traffic, with the activities of the cluster usage that you see just now in the early slides, you'll find that the area already impacting some of the vulnerable areas. Now, the very sensitive areas, the one that you can see around there, the big circle, these are the areas which are vulnerable. So in Southeast Asia, we are not very lucky to say that everything is okay. Although nothing very serious yet has happened, but we have to bear in mind that all this thing is getting into a slowly worsening. It's not improving. Okay. Now, next slide, she shows you our fisheries has gone down. We keep on catching fish. We never think of how much fish we should actually catch. So at the end of the day, you can see you originally catch all the big fish. Now we are catching the small fish. You're getting less and less. So the supply of fisheries begins to be affected. All right. Next one, we shows you that one of the problem that is creating this is also our consumptions. All right. Now you can see how we move into that type of directions. Now, this is the things that when we eat, do we really think of how much we are creating a problem? I think it's about time that we should rethink when we start consuming so much of the meat, so much of the natural products, and how it affects, our footprint, energy footprint. So this is another area which shows us now that we have to really start doing something. Okay, you have already crossed the line. Next, please. Now, in addition to this problem that we are facing, we begin to see in the regions, there are many areas called hypoxic, means the oxygen level is very low. Okay, now we have low oxygen level in certain area. When you have the hypoxic zones increases, then it could be very dreadful because that is lack of oxygen, and the marine animal will not be able to grow well, and it affects our ecosystem. Okay. Now, globally, the increase has been from 100 to 408 in 2007. By now, I think it will have increased more. So what I have mentioned up there, the situation is getting worse and worse. It's not getting better and better. Okay, next, please. The mangrove, I think you all know how important mangrove are, so I don't have to go into detail, but we are losing mangrove almost every year. So today, the amount of mangrove that is left are very limited. Even in the Philippines, in Southeast Asia, we keep on cutting because in the early 80s and 90s, many of the mangrove were cut off for fish farm, for shrimp farm. So, and the other thing, we are cutting mangrove for firewood. So we have taken a lot of all these things, taking for granted, but we have lost the major ecosystem that is protecting us from the shore. Now, what will happen is if the mangrove were removed, you have more flood. So we lose in terms of areas being threatened by flooding, and we lose a lot. I think there's some estimate that, we lose 6,600 square kilometers of mangrove area since 1996. And it was calculated that the loss of mangrove prevent, you see, if the mangrove was protected, it would prevent more than 65%, 65 million worth of property damages that has been occurred. All right. And it reduced flood risk to more than 15 million people if we have kept the mangrove. But now we lost it because of the mangrove has lost unless you replant it back. So this is an effort that we have to think very carefully when we start touching on removing mangrove. Although now in Southeast Asia, many countries have started to replant it, to manage it. These are actions after we have destroyed it. Next. State of the seagrass bed is also important. Seagrass bed is not much, but actually it play a very important role in the carbon fixation. So storing up 18% of the world ocean carbon. It's a very important thing, but we have been polluting the seas. We have been removing some of the seagrass beds, and that affects the restorations of carbon, Well, since late 19th century, almost 30% of the seagrass bed has gone. Now, I do not know, when you ask our parents or the earlier generation, they will tell you that along the Manila Bay sites, along the coastal areas in the islands in Philippines, you can see seagrass bed, you have a coral reef all around here. But now you hardly see them. Okay, next. So you look at the estuaries. I mentioned earlier that this is a very important part, but even our estuaries, our rivers are also being affected. And human activities along the coastal areas convert land areas for housing has resulted in the destruction of the estuarine habitat. And you will see the next slides, which shows that most of the next please, all these things that happen, destruction of habitats, are due to some causes. Now here, give you 3 major areas that we have to look into. One is the government and management failures. I was really pleased to hear the Undersecretary's statement today that you are taking actions and to do all these things. But 30 years ago, I hardly hear this, and hardly have chance to really see the governments are playing a very important role together in addressing this. It is a good sign that things has changed, although slightly late, but we still can do something. So I want to talk more about why we go into governance and management failures, so that we have to really take a special care about it now, is that the speed that we are using the sea and the coast is faster than the past. Okay, and the demand for good services, the demand for products has been very high. So the tendency is where the management people who have to weigh whether to give up certain area or not, is something that we have to recover. Now, that's what I said, that you have to understand the importance of the ecosystem when you start talking about management. Which one to give up, which one you can replace, all right? So this is a management decision as we go into it. But how do you develop a system where before a policy and a management decision is made, you take into all this into consideration? In many cases, this has not been considered. We are not talking about Philippines, we're talking about the whole world. In different countries, we got different type of challenges. So the other issues that is facing us is poverty. Poverty is still an issue that in many countries, we still have a certain level of poverty that is occurring. Even in the United States, I just came back from the States, and I was told that 40% of the population do not have more than $1,000 in their pocket, which means that they can't even afford to pay for the basic needs. Now, these are very important issues, and I hope not to see that thing happening too much in this region, but it's getting worse now. That many countries are still having a big group of people living in poverty. And if you are living in poverty, you will have not care about the environment. They will start pushing for what they can get. And unsustainable economic developments. This is something that is creating the development. Because one time you want to develop your economy, so you encourage development. and you encourage development, you do not take care of the impact on the environment, you do not take care of the impact on the resources, then you probably will lose out. At the end, the unsustainable economic development will occur. However, this unsustainable development economy can be addressed by the policymakers, by the awakening of knowledge of what we should do. And only when we are able to bring this up, we will not be able to solve it immediately, but we will take certain time to address it. And I think this is an issue that we normally want the policymakers to really play a very important role when they start developing their economic plan. We have seen, for example, like sand mining along the coast. It was very common before, you see, but now it has stopped. Partly because there's no more to mine. But the other thing is that, you know, there are awakening of this, the better understanding of the situation. Next, please. Well, some example I've just mentioned, coral mining. You all know coral mining has been very, very, very terrible in this part of the world. All right. I think in Indonesia, in the Philippines, we all face this, and there's not much good coral around. I remember in the 80s, when I was leading a study of the coastal resources in this region, and especially in Sabah, I can walk out of the main road and I can see coral around. Now, if you start going to Sabah, you know, Kinabalu, and you walk out of the land, you hardly get anything. Okay, many of the coral has been retreated, it's gone. So it's important for us to really understand the importance of keeping all these very valuable resources. The moment we lose the ecosystem, we lose it forever. Now you have sand mining, as I said earlier, it's a common phenomenon in developing world. It's easy to get sand, it's cheaper. All right. And then you have these polluting industries where you have a lot of plastics, a lot of waste being channeled into the sea. And this is still happening, you see. And what you heard about the Japanese situation, you know, is one example of this, how the waste were then dumped into the sea. And what are we going to get 10 years, 20 years later? We do not know. It can be very serious. Now, then you have reclamations. And this is the type of things that policymakers can make quick decisions to avoid this. All right. And dynamic fishing, I think in the Philippines, it was so common before. All right. When I was living in the Philippines, this is one of the problems that we all face, you know. And I think now it has been resolved, but already in a way late. You see, I mean, you can see why did the people go into dynamic fishing? And then you have this unregulated aqua farming practices. You see, we think that aqua farming is good because it's produced fish for us, but you don't forget what they dump into the sea is also equally serious, you know. And there's a lot of our coastal areas have been black, you know. And aqua farming, when it's done in large quantities, you begin to face with a problem of how do you now manage a balance of development between aqua farming along the coastline and shipping, you see. And I remember major challenges when we try to do coastal management in the Xiamen area. The whole Xiamen Islands in the 80s, you know, you have the port full of cage culture, full of oyster farming, and it clustered the navigational lines. Then the ship comes in, cannot get in. See, so when you have to clean up this area, you find that it's so difficult to move 5,000 households out of the area. It creates a lot of political challenges, a lot of social problems. And this is something that if you plan earlier, this thing will not happen. So you need really to look into all aspects, okay, to be able to address this. Next. Next, please. Now, We come to the issues of the causes now, government failure and weak management. Now, this is where we coming to the point. Governance failure is basically, in the early days, the government's concept of managing the coast, managing all these things are not there. It takes a long time before they realize this. But the lack of a proper policy to govern the operation, to govern the management of a certain area has resulted in the consequences we've just mentioned. Now, the other thing that contributes to this is the failure in management exercise itself. You know, when we have a fisheries department established, the job of the fisheries department is to expand fisheries. Okay? Now, if you have a marine department, their job is to make sure that the marine areas are, open for the ship to come in. They are not talking so much about how much you should control, the waste discharge into the sea. You never even consider, how this economic operation affects the environment. So it takes time for us to create an environment where proper management have to be done prior to all these things that happen. Now, that is the reason why we come to this question of we need to strengthen our governance at all levels. Because all the time people think governance is a job of the central government. But governance is not the job of the central government. It has to be vertically go right down to the local governance. And when we face with a pollution problem or an environment problem, it is not the job of the scientists. You see, many people think, oh, this is a special thing, let's give it to the university. So what will the university do it? It's type of projects, get money from the government, they do as research. You finish the research, that's it. Cool. So we need all these efforts to clear it up. Okay. So I think this is where we will have to go into this, and we need very clearly inadequate policy guidelines and institutional arrangement to coordinate. The word coordinate is very important. We need to coordinate. And for example, land and sea use planning, you just use land and sea planning alone is still not enough. You still have to address many of other issues. Upstream, downstream developing planning, you must consider multi-sector planning and management, as well as environmental management from the land to sea. A very comprehensive approach is lacking. And another thing that is lacking is we lack of proper national and coastal ocean governance policy. I must say that over these 30 years I've seen in this region, things has changed. Many countries have started to have ocean policy, have marine policies, have even go into this integrated coastal zone management, integrated coastal area management policies. This is a very, very significant progress that has been made by the countries in the region. But you must not forget, you move out of here, you go to Africa, you go to Latin America, it's still in the early stage that we are in. So our effort is not only to make sure that in Southeast Asia we are waking up, we are able also to help people from the other region. Next, please. Now, when you talk about management failure, I put down here there's inadequate coordination and integration of management measures. Here it is a very good example. In most countries, when you have the line agencies, the line agencies don't talk to each other. They compete for each other more often for finance, for manpower, for all sorts of things. They don't really coordinate. So when you are establishing a fish farming, then that is the role of the fisheries department. Okay, now how does it affect the other area? They may not consider that much. So this line agencies bureaucracy has been long there. It's not only in the Philippines, everywhere in the world, we have this problem. So how do you get the different line agencies to sit down and discuss before you develop anything? There must be something to draw them, common objective, common visions to address this. That was not there. For years, development was done by a sector. It's not done by a collective measure. You see, only now you have a national plan and all these things, but these plans has to take into consideration multi-sectoral approach. And in many cases, this has not happened before. So this is one of the areas that we have to do. And if you want to improve your management, what do? You have to reduce interagency and sector conflicts. This is one of the biggest challenges. Now, to reduce interagency and sector conflicts is good, easy to say, not easy to do. Now, I was giving you an example in Xiamen where you have 4,000 to 5,000 aquaculture farms established along the port area. Now, to move them out, who is going to pay for it? Who is going to give job? Who is going to pay the compensation? How do you deal with the kids? You know, there are 4,000 to 5,000 people involved. So things like this make it difficult for many of the policymakers to implement things when the problem arises. So we have to prevent that, and you have to do it earlier than later. Then reduce and ad hoc crisis-oriented management measures. We have to prevent that. You know, we don't have to wait until you have a major oil spill along the coast. Then you say, how do you now solve the problem? Okay. Now that is the ad hoc attitude of addressing the issues. When you have mass kill of fishes along the coast, then you start going to investigate, well, what is the cause of that? You know, it's too late. Okay. So many of these issues have to be addressed earlier than later. Now, increased management planning and executions across the sectors is a big challenge for all managers. How do you execute program across various sectors? You see, it's just an example that you take DENR. You want to do something to protect the environment, but you have talked to Marine Department. You got to talk to the other department to cooperate. If they don't cooperate with you, what do you do? So there is a lot of challenges that you have to face. Okay, so you must have a system where such cooperation can be established. Okay, so now you look into the, you know, you have to reduce the inefficiency and cost effectiveness in implementing, because if individual agency is doing the thing by themselves, it's going to be very costly. But if you have a cooperation between the various agencies, you will reduce the cost actually. So in other words, you have to generate attractions, cost-saving measures that the agencies involved will feel the benefit of it. They will get something out of it rather than to waste money. You see, so all these operations will require a lot of thinking, a lot of effort, a lot of planning. So if you are a manager, you are going to solve those problems. You cannot think of only solving one problem alone. You have to think about a more broader perspective of how to tackle it. Now, what happened to this is in the past, there's a lack of effective operational methodology. You know, there's no operational methodology available at that time. So in the 60s, 70s, 80s, up to the 90s, we still face with a lot of this problem. You know, I will come back to the story of how we now develop ICM as a solution. And lack of management capacity. You see, because most people thinking management is done by the government people. If I'm a scientist, I don't get involved in management. All right. So you leave everything to the government official. The government official may not be trained that way. So their knowledge is very limited. For them to manage it will be very difficult. So the management capacity is one of the biggest challenges today. Next, please. Now, what is the consequence of governance and management failure? You can see here, 60% of all corals are at risk. 50% decline in fish population, and 40% ocean fish stocks overexploited. Have I reached 1 hour already?
It's okay. If you want to have a
I'll finish this, I'll give a quick. Okay, so you see that we are losing a lot, and we have to find ways of regaining it back. Next, please. Okay, but World Bank make a calculations that just mismanaging fisheries alone costs a global economy of 50 billion a year. So we're just losing it. And loss of fishing jobs, it becomes a trend. So nowadays, you find that we have less fishing, fisheries products, fisheries economy has gone down, fishermen also has gone down. This is the trend today. Next. Therefore, the second message in this talk that I want to highlight is that unsustainable human activities and the greed for economic development by the government actually has contributed to obstructions and damage to the functional integrity of the aquatic ecosystem. So in other words, the current aquatic systems services that's given, the people benefit a lot. We have been failing. And the reason for this is this lack of proper governance and management regime. Of course, you put the blame onto the government, but that is not enough. You see, you have to get everybody to understand what we are facing. Next, please. Okay, before I go into part 2 of the part 1, give you the background of how important the aquatic ecosystem is. It shows you how our lack of management, lack of governance has created serious consequences, and the lack of capacities, the lack of proper management system has resulted in the inability to manage our ecosystem more effectively. Okay, so this is a situation occurred especially after World War II. You know, when World War II in the 1930s over to the 40s, that period until 1970s, the whole world are actually in a state of rapid development of the economy. So you don't care about the environment, you want to develop your economy. So all the countries are involving into this. So now it comes to a time that what shall we do? And so when you begin to see the failures, you can begin to see the destruction that has already occurred. So the next step would be something that we have to discuss. How do we now face these consequences and come up with some approachable, manageable type of methodology that you can use at all levels? So can I stop here for a while? And for how long? 5 minutes? Okay, then we give you time to go out for me to have a drink. Okay, now we go into the second part of the lecture, and this second part is going to be focused more and more closer to what you are looking for, how to address the coastal management issues. Okay, now I will tell you the history that's going behind, and it's important to take note that the integrated coastal management, it doesn't come as a ready package. You know, it's an evolution. So let me start off by linking coastal sustainable development agenda and ICM. Next, please. Now, this slides actually shows you the changes that took place over time regarding the the global efforts in the various years, and how it leads to the sustainable development strategies, and how this has become the international goal for all the countries. Okay, so if you are aware that the post-war World War II, that's from 1945 to 1950, at this time, the countries are going into a restructuring, because after the war, every country is restructuring, planning how to move forward, how to create more jobs, how to create more economic development. So that phase of the world, all the effort is to move forward, development as much as you can, exploit as much as you can, and they will at the same time have enough resources, because during the war, you don't have all these economic activities. So they can supply many of these requirements. So that has enabled many countries to move so fast in various aspects of terrestrial as well as aquatic economy. Then when you come to 1950s to 1970s, this 20 years of development, see, economic development has been very fast now. And it has come to a point where people to consider now what to do, because the governments are pressured with these poverty issues. They must solve these poverty issues, therefore they encourage various activities. So there was no such thing as protect the environment during that time, you know. So the consequence of these actions over years has resulted in depletions of signs of depletion of resources, have created signs of polluting the environment, you know. And the scientists, of course, have been spending a lot of time studying all these things. And the consequence is that who is going to take actions? Who is going to be aware of this? So that was the time that towards 70s, the efforts, the international community begins to come out with some of their suggestions. That's where at this time, there is this understanding that growth has a limit. Because in the past, you don't think about growth has a limit, keep on developing. But that's where the first document that comes out in 1972, this is the Commission's on Limits of Growth, and by the Club of Rome, and this is the concept of sustainable development. That is the first time in 1972, the concept of sustainable development was created. But it's a very vague idea, you see. And how is sustainable development is going to solve the problem? Nobody knows. There will be just a study by the experts, scientists, and eventually they come up with many recommendations. That's why following up that you have this Stockholm Conference on Human Environment this is the first World Summit in 1972, endorsing this concept. Yes, there's a limit of growth. We cannot go further than that. Now, we all have to slow down, but do what? How to do it? Still very vague. Okay, so during this period, you can have quite a lot of this reporting. You know, you have the Brundtland's report, for example, talking about a common future. No, and I attended the meeting in 1972 in West Africa, where the Rio conference was taken. Of course, this is great. We all like it, you know. But how to do it is not something that we would be able to discuss. And what we are thinking at that time, make the government do the job. Tell the government this is what is important. We develop a policy, then everything will be solved. No. As we move forward, you begin to see that this is not the end of the story. This is the beginning, how we can move forward. So starting from 1972 onwards to 2000, the international efforts are all focusing on every means. What are the possible way of developing methodology to address this. So this is a period where you have concept of coastal zone management in the early phase and initiated early in the United States, and then it moved forward. Okay, but and a lot of these are try and error. A lot of these are scientific studies or even the academic reports. But as you know, the university professors don't go out of their lecture room to the field. So nobody think that how to implement on the ground. They were thinking of what will be the direction, what will be the policy issues that we need to develop. So it needs time. And these times that you have seen over this period is from 2000 to 2017 is a period of search. It's a period of exploring suitable methodology and also creating a lot of public awareness, creating government's awareness, and they were able to bring these issues to the UN and creating a national policy decision. But that is about all we see in the later part of the whole program, that the governments are being pressurized or being influenced in international conventions that you have to make sure that you move into sustainable development. Okay, so so you can see that in 2000 to 2017, you have various international agenda being set up. You have the Millennium Development Goal, you have the plan of implementations. Okay, so people already start talking about how to do it, you know, and I think that is where at this early phase, people are still moving around searching for solution. You know, there's no really anybody thinking about doing it on the ground. Then in 2018 onwards, you know, you find that there are also a lot of international effort, and you can see the whole list of UN decades of ocean science for sustainable development, UN decades of ecosystems restoration, Paris Agreement, you know, all these things that comes out, or international commitment, you see. And these international commitments in between this period from 1990s onwards, there are some efforts being undertaken internationally at a level to see how they can implement on the ground. So that is the time in the early 90s, right to today, beginning to develop the methodology that is required. You know. Next. Now, I give here some of the assessments by experts, you know, that by 2002, 10 years after the Rio Convention, the World Summit on Sustainable Development, little progress had been made. The coast continued to degrade. Integration across sectors, disciplines, level of government, stakeholders, and spatial and temporal scales are wanting. So there are not much effort being done to do this. And now, and in the World Summit of Sustainable Development in Rio in 2012 in Africa, the recommendation was our effort, we should invest in partnership. So in other words, that is a beginning to talk about we must work in partnership. You know, the partnership concept begins to come out into play. Then there's a recommendations to use ecosystem-based management, strengthen the linkage between government and private sector. So they begin to realize the issues. And then strengthens science policy integration. Okay, so we want scientists to be involved so that we can then strengthen the policy decision. And you have strengthened the spatial and temporal integration. These are all put in together. So these are call that we have to move towards the directions. Okay, but still, nobody has a methodology to say how can you do it, you know, in a scale that everybody can implement. You can take into consideration all these issues. That has been lacking until the later time of the century. Now, the SDG goal, of course, has been very useful because it strengthened political commitment. It's easy for policy makers to understand that you must reach this level, you must reach that level, and how to do it is up to them. All right. And governance and management concept begins to redefine. People talk about the importance of governance, talking about the importance of management. Now we have to begin to understand these difficulties. In the early days when we were in this position, the scientists never think about management. You see, never think about governance because that is not their job. Okay, all the consideration are more into very specific issues to address it. And for a general understanding of the importance of governance, to get involved into this and how to work with the policymakers is difficult. You can't find a scientist willing to work with a politician because they don't talk don't see eye to eye, right? They don't talk to each other. So this type of dialogue will have to change. And that is a type of issues that we have to start thinking. All right. How do you get all these people to interface, to change so that they can all understand each other? Okay, next. So the Sustainable Development Goals, I think you're familiar with it. And that is adopted. But again, question of how to really achieve all this or goal will be something that you have to wait until the government put in efforts, but that is not enough, right? But that's where we want to talk about, especially in our case, our concern is more linked with SDG 14, where life below water. And this is where we will have to put our focus this time along this to achieve this goal, all right? And the other goal will be integrated into it. All right, next. Now, the SDG 14, you see there are several areas. They address marine pollution, they address healthy ocean, they address ocean acidification, address sustainable fisheries, marine protected area, fishery subsidies, and all these areas that they are talking about are still at the level of just general concept. How do you put them all together? How do you address many of these issues? It's not there. So the methodology has not been developed. Okay. And that is, over this period, it come up with a story of how do you implement activities to achieve sustainable development on the ground. So in other words, if you are from a province, a certain barangay or from certain area, and you are doing sustainable development, how can you show me that this is sustainable development? You can tell the government that this is what we have achieved. All right. You need indicators, you need a lot of things to show it. And this is not available. So this becomes a big challenge, especially for countries in the developing world, where economic development is more important than environmental management. So next slides, which shows you a historical perspective of how we get involved into this. I have been, over this period of time, it's an opportunity for me to get involved in this whole period. And therefore, I can tell you a lot of the personal background history about it. Now, if you look at 1950 to 1959, the management activities in the past are strictly issue-based. What I mean by issue-based here is that we simply take an issue like pollution, then we solve the pollution problem. Overfishing, we solve overfishing problem. Okay, so it's mainly issues-based management. So you cannot say they have no management. Say, well, we manage fisheries. We manage the MPAs. Sure, this is important, but has it solved the overall issues in that area? It's not yet. Okay, so this 1950 to 1959, the efforts were more along this area. But when you reach 1960s to 1979, this time, the efforts in the US start, and it started off from the San Francisco Bay, where they were trying to manage the Bay Area up to today, Now they are beginning to see the conflicts, the difficulties. But the people, the planners in the San Francisco Bay and the scientists are different, you see. But at the University of Rock Island, there are a lot of people getting involved in early stage into this. And therefore, the concept of integrated coastal zone management was brought up. And that was very preliminary, very broad idea, and the concept of the process being introduced. And that's where the ICM process and a very simple framework has been introduced. And this is the time where all this development pushed through for many years. And of course, in the United States, it was led by University of Rhode Island, and they pushed through this. But however, during this period, the approach being taken are mainly university-driven. So it's part of a university research program. It's university-driven. It's not yet government-driven. Okay, so to move this process forward, we need some time. So the coastal zone management promote a lot of coastal research during that period. But then from that period onwards, until the establishment of the sustainable development goal, you will see the action has moved forward. Okay, now we are looking into here in the from 1979 or 1980 to 1999. This is a very critical period. Now, 1980, in Southeast Asia, we haven't done anything on ICM yet. But what we have during that time are implementing some of the US-led ICZM program. Okay, so there are several concepts have been raised during that time. In 1999, we have ICZM being raised in EU, coastal resource management, CRM, coastal area management, integrated coastal area management that we started in 1994, and you have EU ICM initiative. In other words, during this period, the scientists who practice ICM management started creating a lot of terminology. Okay, and we were involved when we first started the projects in an ICM, and I must mention that as early as the 1980s period, I was implementing a USAID project, and it was on coastal resource management. And that time, how do you implement the coastal resource management? Make sure that the countries prepare a report, do a survey of the coastal areas, record down how much of resources they have. That's it, Then you write into a book. So you publish a few books for different countries. As a scientist, I'm very happy because we can publish it. Okay, but has government taken over this and read through it and implement it? The answer is no. Most of the time, you have a grant, you create a project, you find a report, send it to the government. They say, thank you, keep it there. So for them to really seriously look into how to solve it, it's not there. So when the end of this project that I was leading in 1992, I was requested by GEF, a new global environmental facilities that is a fund donors, and also UNDP, requested me to lead a team of international experts to now draft a program on marine pollution. You see, and at that time, to address marine pollutions, because at that time the pollution is a major concern. So they want to find out how to solve marine pollution. So I took up the request and lead a team of 7 experts with from United States, from United Kingdom, and from Philippines. That time, the undersecretary of one of the DNR was joining me, and then we were able to come up with this pollution management proposal projects. During that time, I was lucky to be able to convince our group to accept, quietly, I put up integrated coastal management as one of the area for testing to see whether integrated coastal management will work or not, and to work out the methodology. So that is a time where we put in 2 sites, Batangas in the Philippines and Xiamen in China, was selected as a test sites for us to see whether the ICM approach will work or not. So during that area, we are able to create a situation where we have an open way of doing it. So I was thinking that whoever they implement the project will be able to try it out, So that was done, hiding under the general concept of marine pollution, okay? And I was trying to use this method to show that marine pollution can be covered. But to get a holistic approach for other projects, we can't do it. But we do it this one in the beginning. So I thought that was over, and went back to work with the what we call the currently the World Ocean the World Fish Center, which is formerly called International Center for Living Aquatic Resource Management, ICLAM, which was based in the Philippines. Now, before the end of 1992, I was asked by IMO and UNESCO to take over this implementation of this project. He said, you are involved into this, and therefore you should implement it. So I can't say no, so I was convinced to take it up. So this is the first time I take up this type of program and implement the project. And it's only 2 little sites with a small amount of money to demonstrate how ICM can be used to address many of these common things. So there is a learning period. Now, through this period, we're able to develop the coastal management, the process that has been, and a lot of these are initiatives developed by the local. And first and foremost, we have difficulty to convince the national government to let the local government take the lead. Because in all countries, it's a central government that dictates. So you have an international project, you give the fund to the national government will implement it according to what you want. Okay, but this will not work. And after a lot of argument, we're able to convince the government that let the local government try. And that's how we are able to, even in China, change the concept of the money will not go to the central government, but the money goes straight to the local government to implement, helping them to implement it. So this is a very good first example of local government taking the initiative and the lead to implement it, and that is very important message that I want to send to you is why we have moved from central government oriented approach in the past to moving to local government implemented program. And the idea of showing to the people what sustainable development is not that easy unless you have a methodology to reach there. So that is how we first started the initiative in Southeast Asia. Okay. Now, with the 2 projects that was in place, we were able to test many of the methodology and to develop and advance the technology further. So that is where we have in Batangas, very early phase, to get to get people to get involved into this, it's not easy. You want to build partnership. So when we try to build partnership, we have to bring in the private sector scene. And that is a time I was very happy that your current undersecretary, Malu Ernie, isn't it? Yeah, Malu Ernie was part of the local, the private sectors. I think she's from Petron, right? She come in there and then she take a lead into this. So eventually we see this type of private sector are taking the lead in joining this, you know. And so over this period of time, Batangas was able to continue, even up to today, right? They are still our sites, and they were able to show some improvement. But the important part of Batangas and Xiamen is opportunity that we use it to test our approach. So that was a local government-based activities. Then from then on, we move into how to implement this. There will be another long history to go through it. But I want to show you that the effort is done in the Philippines, and you have made a strong contribution to this. And today we have a very, very concise approach and methodology that can be implemented quite straightforward, you know, and it has been tested already. So towards the 2000 onwards, now we will have the concept of ICM begins to be getting a lot of support coming in. So we went into the stage of consolidating the ICM approach, consolidating the methodology, and then evolve the whole ICM into an ICM system. And I want to highlight this point that ICM today, it has reached a level of a system. And if it's a system, then you have to apply it as a system. You know, cannot change like as you like. So the whole purpose of make it into a system is that you have to fulfill the basic requirements. Okay, so it has become a system, and then we move on now to scaling up. And I think your activities that you are taking in the different parts of in Philippines, this is a scaling up process. And then you can see from there are other coastal management efforts like environmental-based management, or even the large marine ecosystem. This has been created, but it is also embraced the whole concept of integrated management. Okay, next. Now, I like to mention here is the conceptual development and practices of ICM. Actually, it evolved very early, I said, in 1960s. It's strengthened by decades of practice with strong scientific and multidisciplinary undertaken in 1970s. Now, Citizen Science and Kenneth, many of this has already passed away. And then it is recognized as a viable practice now in 1980s. That is, in the 80s, people begins to accept that ICM is a viable practice to achieve sustainable development. So now we are quite confident that we have international acceptance. And then in the Earth Summits in 1990s, it has been accepted internationally. So it becomes an approach that we can utilize it as a framework of choice for implementing international convention. Because you know what we have all the past is international convention, one after another. But how to implement the international convention? Nobody come out. All right. But now this has been recognized that yes, we can use the ICM approach to implement the Biodiversity Convention, for example, and many other conventions under the UNEP. So we can handle all this using a standard methodology. And then the later part is the proliferation of ICM practices. And mainly these efforts are done through PEMSEA. We are able to multiply and replicate. Now, if we can multiply and can replicate with very little funding, then we can say that there is a chance of success. If it's every funding come from PEMSEA, then I think it's a failure. It's not easy because you can't continue forever. Okay, so the money has to come from you, the local, and only through your own resources, and you must be able to benefit from it, then this will be able to sustain. So that is how the whole operation has changed. Okay, next. Now, ICM as a management practice, since the period from 1990 over up to today, is already 5 decades. During these 5 decades of development, we have tested ICM in different places, in different countries. And this already helped us to gain more information and develop the necessary expertise and skill, as well as develop proper methodology to strengthen the operation of the management system. So during these five decades, ICM practices become more scientifically sophisticated and robust, more inclusive and collaborative, because you are able to even consider the traditional practice into the ICM approach. Now, more politically accepted internationally, and it can promote change in human perceptions of their relationship with the coasts, seas, and oceans. Because we have better knowledge and we are able to create an awareness internationally. So when you develop ICM program, you're creating awareness at the local level. And with the local level involvement, it will, of course, influence the province influence the national level. So this approach that has been done over these years have proven the fact that ICM is working, because you can then get local initiative, create a sub-regional initiative, regional initiative, and then you have national support, national policies. And this way, we speed up the whole operation. So I think ICM today, I can say very safely that it will work into in the long term. Next. So I mentioned earlier that ICM is not only our creation. ICM is an evolution from various efforts that has been undertaken, and they were presented by different organizations because they have different objectives, right? So from cross-sectoral integrated coastal and planning process by CCAP, and then you have ICM cycles, and one approach, ICM guidelines that's been prepared by GSM, World Bank ICM guidelines, and then ICM guidelines, by the scientists. And then you have European, Canadian, Australian, all have their own implementation guidelines. It causes confusion sometimes. Which guidelines do you follow? Okay. So that's why when we come out with our own ICM system, we call it ICM system. Forget about what guidelines. Use a system. The system provides you the various framework, the process of doing it, the dynamic of creating it, and this process, you can master it, then you will be able to implement it at the ground level. So that is, up to today, the result of all the 5 decades of efforts. But the ICM system is only very recent. Okay, next. Well, this just simply tell you that people like to create new terms, So we hope that eventually we narrow down to a simple concept of integrated coastal management, and it's a systematic approach so that you will not, going back again, how much if you change from CRM to integrate ICAM, people start getting confusion, But if you are having one system, then people can concentrate on that. Okay, you probably will see that in the case of international agencies that's implementing environmental protection, the tendency is they will look into biodiversity, they look into pollution, all right? They will not look into fisheries, because fisheries is not their job. No, if you really look into the sea, you cannot differentiate one from another. You must take it as a whole. Okay, and that is where the holistic approach in our PEMSEA approach, we take into that consideration. Next. So if you practice ICM, we must be able to evaluate. And you want to ask yourselves, what is the precise role of ICM? Okay, what role do you play? If you are implementing an ICM, What role do you play? Okay, so what constitutes a successful ICM is where you have to say, what will be the criteria? What sorts of indicators do you have? All right, to consider it as to be successful, and how ICM addresses wicked problems. Now, don't forget, when you are dealing with ICM, you have to address many, many issues. And these issues sometimes are not controlled by you, nor you can expect to happen. I give you one simple example. You will run a local government projects very well, and things going on very well. Suddenly, the person in charge, the mayor or the governor, his term of office expired. His opposition took over. Then he said, okay, anything that's been done by my past, all gone. All right, now what do? The whole project collapsed. Who is going to take over? To rebuild it, you take a lot of time. And that happened in the Philippines. And this is the reason why we later on pushed very hard to involve partnership. So we always have an ICM program where you have a council, a local council, where the private sectors sit there, where the NGOs sit there, where the various stakeholders are involved in it. So if there is a change of government, administrator, he has to think about his relationship with all this, and we were able to overcome many of such issues in many countries by creating a situation where the stakeholders were involved. So if a government, a successor, try to say that I don't want this project anymore, they have to face the stakeholders, not only the politician. So here we have to be very conscious that ICM operation cannot be all independent from interference from the political things that is affecting you. So that is a key thing that we have to remember. All right. So we have to, how do we walk through the whole process that you can implement ICM, you can still face with any changes that's coming. So this wicked problem is something that, it can happen. All right. So you may also have a problem with funding. No funding. Then another group say, okay, I have more fund to support you. Then that group probably would control your operation. This is again a wicked problem. Now, how do you solve it? You're sandwiched between these things. Now, how do you tackle that problem? So the wicked problems actually becomes a very prominent issues in all implementation process. Now, what sort of success is attributed to ICM? So when you have implemented the ICM program, you have gained success, then the different department will say, okay, I have done this, I have done that. So who get the benefits? It's not you. Everybody get the benefits. But how do you share this benefit? Now, this is something, again, and ICM managers, we have to build it up. Okay, how does ICM operationalize integration? Now, the key word is integrated. How do you integrate? You see, integrate is not only coordinate. Integrate, how do you integrate the various policies, sometimes conflicting in policies in the same government, right? Vertical coordination and vertical integration, you still have to consider, because central government may have a policy, local government may be implementing differently. So how do you now marry all these things together? So this is the type of issues that we have to consider very carefully, integration, and I will talk more about this, how to do this as we go around. But don't forget, integration and coordinations are two keywords. But how can you coordinate? Who do you coordinate? And what do you coordinate? All these issues need to be considered. And they are not scientific issues. These are management issues. Okay? Right. Next slides, the third message I want to give you is that, it's this ICM approach is a very impressive international efforts, towards setting strategies, goals, targets for sustainable development. It's very, very impressive efforts. But it's a slow progress in meeting the global targets. For example, like the Philippines want to achieve the target of SDG 14. Up to now, do you really realize it? No, you may be successful in one area, in one local government, but how do you do it for the whole country? So it is a long process to move forward, but bit by bit, we reach there. Now, lack of effective working modality is one of the issues. You see, before we have proper demonstrations, sites to show you how it works, the methodology to show you this, people are just working in the dark with little knowledge. But now we have a better approach, a better methodology workout, then we can now go straight into the actions if we can fully understand what and how it operates. Next, please. So I go into the part 3 of ICM operational modality. And this is important for ICM practitioners, especially the local government leaders who want to implement ICM. And if you are in charge of the project, you are the head of that local government's unit to handle this, then you must have this knowledge of how to implement it. So I will show you that, next slide. First is the definitions, so that you don't confuse with many of the terms. No? Now, integrated coastal management is a coastal governance and management system. First of all, let's recognize it. It is a integrated, is a management system which is developed to regulate human behavior and preserve the functional integrity of terrestrial and marine ecosystem. So it's a government action to preserve the integrity of ecosystems. All right. Now, within, for achieving sustainable development, but within a defined geographical and administrative boundaries. Now, I specifically want to raise this issue. We have to put it within a specific boundary. That is why we always insist on implementing ICM at a local level, in a municipality or in a province, because your boundary is fixed and you can manage it within yourselves over a time period. Okay. Now, if you are doing ICM for the whole country, it won't work. Everybody have his own. Okay. So it has to start from local government. And that is where we are now in a very good stage in Southeast Asia, because we implement it on the ground. Unlike in the other countries, they are research oriented, but we are local government oriented, field oriented, and result focused. So we can handle this if we follow the process carefully. So next. Now, I call it an ICM system for 2 reasons. Now, if you look at the environmental management system that has been defined in Wikipedia, what does it mean by environmental management system? It refers to management of an organization's environmental program in a comprehensive, systematic, planned, and documented manner. So in other words, you have to meet these basic requirements of comprehensiveness, systematic, stage by stage, and you have to plan it properly, and you have to document it as we go around. Now, in the ICM system, you see what we have. It's comprehensive because integrated governance, coordinated management, and participatory at all levels is very comprehensive. It covers all areas, but only within the local area. Secondly, it's systematic. It's process-oriented. All right. It is process-oriented. That means you go by the process. And as your capacity develops, you will be able to go more and more into it. So it is a very systematic way of targeting your ICM goal, and you can achieve that. Now, in plan, you have to come up with a proper ICM plan, strategies for sustainable development at the local level. And how do you reach there, stage by stage? So it's a very planned activities, and it should be time bound. You cannot have an ICM program, okay, for 10, 20 years or no time bound, or anytime you just have ICM program, that is the end. I don't think it works. ICM, we have to start, do it every 5 years. Then you keep on modifying it and improving it. If you come up with ICM and tell the government, we tell you that, oh, we have ICM already, so no more problem. We solve all the problems, which is not true. It has to be stage by stage. As we move from one stage to second stage, you modify it, you improve it. Now that is where the ICM system allows the modification, the improvement. Then it has to be documented. In other words, you have a monitoring process. You have to monitor how much you have done, whether you follow the procedure carefully or not. So you have to monitor it, and then you have to report, document it and report it. And that's what we talk about state of the coast report in PEMSEA, that every years you come up with a state of report to show how much you have done. Okay. And then you have this one thing ICM approach that we do is different from the other initiative, is that we have the code of practice, and then we can be codified. We can go to ISO certification on governance or in environment. So we can be certified. That means we have met the international standards. So if we implement the ICM properly, I don't say that it's easily, but properly, you will reach there one day. Next. So after we have recognized ICM as a system, the question that we have now, what is the difference between management and governance? And many times people got confused. But now we have to understand that management is the process by which human and material resources are harnessed to achieve a known goal within a known institutional structure. While governance addresses the formal and informal arrangement in an institutional and more by which society issues are addressed. So governance questions the fundamental goals, the institutional processes, and the structure that are the basis for planning and decision making. So in other words, to be short, governance is basically related to policy. Okay, management is basically related to actions on the ground and what action you take to solve the problem. So this you require management action. But governance, you address it more from a policy side, from institutional arrangement side. For example, you say various agencies are not working together. Put them together. This is governance. So the head, the mayor or the governor, we have to make sure that they talk to each other. So that is a process. Okay, that makes a difference between governance and management. Governance doesn't go to the ground and operate it. Management does. Next. Now, the governance dimension is basically the effective and long-lasting ocean and coastal stewardship. Can only occur when you have a predictable, efficient, and accountable governance system in place. So this is something that we have to move step by step. Next, please. So here, the ICM as a system of governance and management, you can see two areas. One is governance is more control. So it relates mostly on policy, legislation, complying with conventions and agreement. This is governance. Now, management is a response and resolve. In other words, you respond to issues like pollution, overfishing, issues like habitat destruction. These are management issues. We have to address it. But the overall governance aspect is being taken care of under this governance sector. So I mentioned here all these necessary action to be taken under the management. So management is a key word for us to move into details. Next, please. Now, here comes to the question of why local government. Now, I would say in the past, you will never get international projects to get the local government people together. Say, look, you people have a role to play. We talk to the national officers, we talk to the higher level, okay? And then you think we can solve the problem. Because how to talk to UP is not my job, it's your job, you know? So that type of attitude make it sometimes very difficult to really translate our concept of our requirements to them, you know? But local governments have a direct interactions with the stakeholders, isn't it? Now you have to interact with the local stakeholders, with the people. So you are the one in the front line that is mixing with all the stakeholders. And whatever decision that you make will affect their livelihood, will affect their well-being. So you are the key people to make things work. And that is where we want to highlight the point that local governments take the initiative. And this is not easy. Not all national governments in the past accept this. So every time I go to different countries talking to the governments, no, we will do it. How much money do you have? You give it to me. Then I will then talk to them all the time. Because if we follow this, the way I use the Western way, I can make a lot of friends because you give the money to them, and then you, at the end, you come up with a report, job is done. Okay, but no action on the ground. It's not necessarily you will do it. So from the central government to filter down to the central government, take challenge. It's not easy. Okay, but now I think the world has changed. Local governments begins to take a predominant role into the management their own resources, and I think that is key to make a change. I can see that the change is occurring in Asia, but I see the problem still in Africa, in Latin America. It's still far away from what we are trying to do. And I only hope that we succeed in Asia, we can influence other countries to take up. And that is where the real challenge we are facing today. Next, please. Okay, this is where the key things I want you to remember is it's not easy to achieve an ICM program just simply 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You just follow it and you get it. It has to fully understand the whole concept. Now, I want to raise the first thing here. That is, this is the ICM framework system. The system will consist of a governance sections where you will be able to address the issues of policy, strategies, and plans that has been developed. They approve it, then it has reached the policy level. It becomes a policy of the local government that we implement it, so that is a policy. Okay, then you have the institutional arrangement. Now that is key. You cannot simply give it to one department of environment and then he finish everything. How this department can then integrate with the others, work together. Now, therefore, you need an institutional arrangement to execute the program. And in many cases, we have a special organization set up, agency set up where the different agencies sit together. Now, in order to make sure that the agencies are able to cooperate, we put in the stakeholders representative there. The stakeholders representative, the local government, people will be able to listen. Then you put in the scientists in their expert to advise them. Then you can have a group of stakeholders sitting together with different agencies. There, you minimize conflicts, okay? Because the interests are all different. So within themselves, they can regulate, they can govern each other. So that will reduce a lot of internal conflicts arising from interagency conflicts, And it's so important that we try to develop this institutional arrangement. That this is the first thing that you have to do is how do you now set it up? We go through the process as we go along. Secondly is that legislation. You may, in a certain time, you may have some regulation that you have to set it up. It has to be approved at the level, at the governance level. Then you have this, the information and public awareness. Now, this is a key thing. Why is it we put this as a governance? Because that's important to send the right message to the stakeholders. Now, to send this message to the stakeholders, you have to make sure that the stakeholders, that your information are accurate. You cannot just write, oh, we have done a great job. No, they have to feel for it. And then regular information sharing by the stakeholders will enable you to monitor each other to achieve the goal that you have set up. Now, so public awareness is an important thing. Now, public awareness in our way of doing it is get the stakeholders into the actual operation. Then they will help pushing this thing through. Okay, so this is one important thing. And then another important thing is financing mechanism. Where do you find the money? When you do an ICM project, the first question you raise is, who is paying? Isn't it? No money, no talk. So you couldn't do it. No, we face it all the time. But if you tell them, the local government, you have the money, it has to come from you. And what will happen if I'm a foreign donor? I come to you, I say, you pay yourself. You say, go to hell. See? So initially, what do? We don't give you 100% all the money. We say, okay, let's co-funding. You come out with a little bit, we come out with a little bit. But when you prove that it works, then all the resources come from you already. Then you can get out. But the important thing is, it has to be your project. It should not be the donor's project. It's your project. Then it will work. So it's important that you, as a manager, you are able to attract funding. Not only you can attract from one source of funding, you can attract a lot of core financial support. See, the international regime is that a donor will come to you and say, this is the US project. Only US people can help you, or a German project, or a Chinese project. But if you are the good managers, you make sure that all of them listen to you. You come up with what you can give. Then we call it the common project. It is our project. Then you will be able to now utilize the resources to move up. But you must make sure that there is a contribution. What your original targets, original budget that you have from your government is the core funding. So you already have the money, but you never use your core funding to attract donors. But you should learn how to use a core funding to attract donors. Now that is the key to achieve financial thing. So to make sure that you not only in gathering money from outside, but you are also able to attract money from the central government. All right. And that again is a mechanism that you have to develop over time. Okay. If you can show something, the central government can use you, sure, the money will come in, right? So, and not only that, you also will be able to attract private sector's funding. You're able to attract NGOs funding. So I don't think in my own experience in ICM, funding is a problem, but it's not the unsolvable problem. Okay, it can be solved. The project manager, the local government person who is in charge must have a very tricky mind. They must be able to talk to people, convince people, then you will be able to get the funding you want. Okay. Now, then you have this capacity development. We do not think that if you want to develop ICM, the capacity should be, oh, I send people to train in America, I send people to train anywhere. No. You learn by doing, because there is nothing new in there. You have to create an opportunity where people learn by doing. You go outside, you listen to conferences, you probably get new ideas. But most of the training has to come from people who are actually doing it. Okay, I will never be able to teach the local people what to do. you teach yourselves, because that is where you learn how to handle it. Next, my next concern now is the second is sustainable development aspect of issues. Now, in these sections, it's very important that you bear in mind you want to address some of the key issues: marine pollution, climate change, resource depletion. Okay, many of these. All these can be lined up there. But which is your priority? Which one do you do first? Which one do you tackle first? You have to have a group agreement. So once you sort it out, you are achieving the goal that you want. For example, you may have selected over time that one of the problems that you are facing is you're losing your marine protected area. Then you want to have a marine protected area. That will be included into your priority. But you can solve 2-3 issues at the same time. And what you are doing now is you build the infrastructure, you build the institutional structure so that it can address a series of issues as time goes by. So this is the second part, that you don't go for a project on the climate change, and then you say, oh, we only do climate change. So ICM becomes climate change. No, that is not correct. ICM is the tool to achieve either climate change or the other problem that the other challenges that you face, pollution or anything. Okay, so that has to be a common understanding. Then that part will be the main actions on the ground, right? Now, when you start moving, when you have done all this operation, you have result. What do you do with the result? You should be able to package it. You should be able to report it. So documentation is part and parcel of the activity. You cannot simply say documentation later. You start off from the first day you do. Then, in most often, you try to use a project, but project have a time frame, short. And if you have 2 or 3 other areas, it has to become a program with more long term. But all these have to be tied in with your objective, with your vision, with the target, then you can achieve that. Now, the third part is that the process, which we call the ICM cycle. Now, the ICM cycle, which we'll come back to it later, is a process that we have to follow. And then we have to go into the reporting system. So we need a state of the coast reporting. I think Nancy will come out later on to explain how it works. The state of the coast reporting is to help you to achieve the goals that has been set. And then we can link this reporting to SDGs goal, to all the other agreement that you can. So biodiversity, for example, it can be added up there. IT target, all these things. And then another issue that is important is that the partnership with the stakeholders. The ICM program cannot just be done by the government alone. You have to bring in the stakeholders together. They must have a say, they must be involved. And then finally, you will go to the certification side. That is when you already achieve a certain level, then you say, okay, I'm ready to be tested. I will then register for ISO certification. If you can get that, then you say, okay, I'm successful. International standard. So here there is a whole process. And it's only the ICM system has this type of coverage that allow you to do it. Okay? Unlike all the other previous attempt in ICZN. Okay, next. Now I want to show you that this process, why do we set this framework? Why? First, you see, by putting in the governance components, we are creating legitimacy and political acceptance. Why is it? If you have the governance system there, where you have the proper plan, you have legislation, you have institutional arrangement, that is a government process. And that will actually give you the legitimacy. In the central government, you can report there, you can get money for that, you can get international support. You have the legitimacy, okay? And political acceptance, the stakeholders are all there. So you will create a lot of local political personnel will come and work with you. Now, to a mayor or to a governor, this is very important because they can gain votes, they can gain confidence. So we have to consider not only solving problem, we have to consider making sure that we get the support from a politician. And this setup will allow you to do so. Okay. And secondly, now the second part of it is to target your investment. You want to put your money to solve problem. So your target investment will need technical know-how. So the experts that you bring in, the local scientists, the national scientists sitting together with you, they provide you the scientific knowledge. Okay, so you are not doing ICM program just without scientific advice. So you work together with this. So it becomes a very science-based ICM program. Then the next one that next please. I mentioned about this ICM cycle. The ICM cycle is a very important process that all ICM activities will have to follow. In other words, you will start off preparing. When you want to do an ICM program, what do you do? First stage is understand what ICM is. Then afterward, you're preparing it. Now, how do you prepare? You have all the process that has been listed out here. You will follow the process. And stage by stage, you will develop it. I won't go into the detail because that would be something separate actions. Then you initiating the ICM management activities, and you developing it, and then you get it adopted at whatever level you can, especially at the local level. It must be adopted unanimously. Then you have to implement it. Now, you may implement this for 3 years to 5 years, according to the local government's terms of office. Then after that, you may have to revise it, improve it, then you go on to the next cycle. So in other words, you call it an ICM cycle when you keep on repeating. The more you go through, the more refinement you have, more effective this system will be. Okay, as your capacity is developed, you already have the expertise to do it. Okay, so you don't need a consultant, you don't need any foreign help, you can do it. So this is where the whole idea of this type of a process-oriented approach. Okay, now, why do you have to do this? It gives you an adaptive process. In other words, these things in the process of your management issues require improvement. So it's adaptive, right? And it's science-based because you already have the scientists working with you. You know, they will give you a much better advice. You can improve it. And the scientists will only come into this process by learning it. Scientists has no idea of what ICM is, but they learn from it. The scientists begin to learn the management issues. The management managers begin to learn how to coordinate, how to link up with the scientific issues. Next, please. So if you look at the whole thing now, you have you create an ICM system to have legitimacy and political acceptance, to have target investments and technical knowledge building. Then you also have the adaptive things in the cycle. Then the fourth is accountability when you make the reporting. And then when you get the partnership, you're working with the stakeholders, working with the various groups, with the partners, private sectors, you are building partnership. You know, and finally, you are able to conform with international standards. This is not a one-time deal. This is repeating and repeating. As you repeat, you get better and better. So that is the whole purpose of the ICM management methodology. And that is the purpose of how this looks so sophisticated, but actually it works stage by stage. But of course, what I said is not enough. There are still many other issues. For example, what dynamics we will use to improve this? Now, there are still a lot of opportunity to talk about it. Next, please. Now, to do this, there is a fundamental change in your, there is a paradigm shift in your concept and practice. You change from what you have done in the past. Now, you must ask yourselves, usually the conventional approach in addressing a problem in the local government, straightforward, right? But now you go through this process. So you are changing your idea, your concept from an area based. Normally you say, okay, small problem, a small area, but from area based into a more holistic approach, more long term. And then you have to promote integration. So this conceptual change occurred. The second thing is local government driven. Why it has been local government driven and not national government driven? Because the local governments are one in the field. And it varies from place to place. So it works very well. And that will allow the mainstreaming of your plan into the local government action plan. That is something that you streamline the whole activities. Now then you have a vision driven. You don't do the project because of funding from outside. You do the project because you have a vision. You all want to build this place into what? When I first entered Xiamen, I talked to the mayor. He said, you give me money, I will do everything. I said, what do you want? Don't know yet. You see? So you have to develop a vision and you have to really come out with very clearly what you really want to achieve. So at the end, he told me, oh, I want Xiamen to be a port city. Okay, so one of the vision is to make it a port city. Now, to make a port city, you cannot have fish cages around. All right, it block the way of traffic. So you have to clear this. So it become a vision-oriented plan. We determine what you should take. Okay. Now you can then create a lot of these opportunities to make a change. So that is vision-oriented. It creates a directions. You have a proper vision, it tells you the direction. And this direction will lead to achieving the goal. Then finally, multi-stakeholders participations. This is important because it reduces the conflicts. Many of the resource use conflicts can be resolved in this way. And then it involve the public sector, involve the private sector, involve the community, then you have less of a problem, you get the support. So this process will help you to solve many of the conflicts that is done very individually. Next. Now, from the operational side, from the methodology side, the operational side, the changes that occurred, you need also a conceptual change. For example, the issue sector status in focus in the past. When I say with marine pollution, you address marine pollution. Oil spill, you address oil spill. All right. Fish overfishing, you address overfishing. In the poverty, you address only a certain area. So it never solved the whole thing in a very integrated manner. Now, this will help you to change with the ICM approach from sector issues to multi-sector issues. And then it's goal-oriented. You reach the SDG vision. And then it's for discipline, you go from this disciplinary to multidisciplinary to interdisciplinary. So in other words, you need a scientist. Scientist may be a biologist. He's not a social scientist. So you need a social scientist to work with a biologist. Only then you can create the multidisciplinary type of interdisciplinary type of relationship. Or else the scientist can give you wrong advice. Then the next one that we're looking into is a single agencies have to move into multi-agencies. So the ICM should involve many agencies. Don't think that the DNR will be the only agencies, other people cannot come in. Then you will never reach anywhere. But you can be the head, you can be the leader, but you have to involve all the other agencies. So multi-agencies, then you will improve your coordination, then you can have joint planning. And now this will help you to solve a lot of the financial problem because it reduces the cost, improve the efficiency. Then you move on to the single, the donor-driven project in the past. You know, in the early phase, we all depend on donors to come in. So we change it from donor-driven. Maybe for the first time, we have a donor. But second time, we make it into a government-driven. Let the government take the role. Say, central government also give money to a local government. You will be in the best position to argue for money. All right. So government-driven into participatory. You know, and then you have a stronger commitments. So this is the change that will take place. And project-based become program-based. And then from program-based, you have the process. This is driven by the process. Right? You started with a project, then become a program. Is driven by the process and the indicator-based. So you say which is the indicator of success. You want to achieve what? This can be developed. And then finally, the ICM project is not only short-term in the past. It's short-term, it becomes a long-term. When long-term, it mainstream into the national, into your local government. So I have always said that ICM does not belong to PEMSEA. It is yours. Eventually, you forget about PEMSEA. Now, when I say forget about PEMSEA, doesn't we forget about to interact? You don't have to be thinking that the donor or the foreign assistant is forever depending on them. After some time, you're already independent. And I keep on telling people, forget about me. My role is over, right? And then you have to move forward. And by doing so, you will get more attention. People will want to cooperate with you, okay? So I think if you be independent, you be the leader. Then you can help the other states, the other provinces in Philippines. Why not, right? So you have all the benefit involving in this. But it's very complicated, right? Very difficult to achieve, but you will be able to make it. Next, please. Now, the type of level of integration I mentioned earlier is a science management integration, intergovernmental integration. Intergovernment here can be between the different local government, between the central government and local government, vertical and horizontal integration. And then you have intersectoral integration, and different sectors work together. And spatial integration, that is when you do the coastal planning, there's also need to look into the various integration of land use and all these things. And then you have this policy and functional integration. You have a policy, and the functions are not integrated. Then one person will do this thing and then policy is doing another thing. So all this integration become a must. Okay, next, please. Now, they use ICM to implement multilateral environmental agreements. But this is just for people say, okay, we have international biodiversity convention, we have this and we have that. How do you now integrate? So, okay, we have done it. So what we have to do is to make sure that what we are doing actually, whether if you follow this system, you definitely are answering the problem, the international convention they want. You achieve sustainable development goal. You also address many of the international convention concerns. So we can reach there. Next, please. So my fourth message here is to integrate coastal management has made significant progress and received international recognition as a framework of choice in achieving sustainable development. This one is already there. But the ICM system, which is only unique in PEMSEA, right? Now, this system provides the needed operational modality. Now, we have the operational modality, which you can use now for integrated governance and management. So you don't have to create a new one. You can operate this, and then you refine it as you go along. And the ICM system can contribute to local implementation. Therefore, by implementing the ICM system, it takes a long term. Therefore, you can achieve the international goal, and you can always sell yourselves that we are addressing the ICM, addressing the sustainable development goal. If you have a proper project, or you are addressing the biodiversity goal, you also have the project. So this is where one shot, an ICM program, answer many of the international convention requirements. Okay, so this means you have a better opportunity to solicit funding from different sources. You can go to UNEP, I address environment problem. You go to FAO, I address the fisheries problem, right? You go to UNESCO, you can get something else differently. Okay, so this is the type of things that I want to highlight, that there is a need to integrate, coordinate, but at the same time, plan ahead. Okay, next. Okay, this is my last part. Is this time okay? Good. I need a drink. Now, this part 4, I'll be focusing on ICM practice in East Asian seas. I think subsequent speakers, they will go more into the details. I just give a general things. And what I want to convince you is these 30 years of operations allow us and convince us that this methodology so far is moving okay. It's moving up. To implement it is very difficult. It's not easy. It's very complicated. And you have to make sure that your team members understand what this is all about. There is no quick way, you know. And some people, politicians will say, okay, it takes so long. You know, we make a decision, we solve it. It's not easy. Now, if you really want to manage it in a sustainable manner, you have to go through the process. Okay. Now, next, please. What I want you to remember is, what do you do if you take up the ICM? There are 12 actions that are related to this. This 12 action is, first of all, you create a shared visions. Now, you must have a shared visions and a stakeholders platform. Now, a shared visions will allow us to bring the stakeholders together forward. So the stakeholders platform, the stakeholders are not to be a problem for you. The stakeholders should be there to support you. So if you use a stakeholders platform properly, you can move very far. Okay? Now, why I say this? Because in some countries, you have a change of leadership very often. If your stakeholders platform is strong, they won't touch it. Any new government that comes in, they will follow this on, because this is the wish of the people. So that is a very important message, that you don't get involved in politics, but yet nobody will throw you out. This project will continue. Okay, so we have seen so many places now it is able to work on well on this line. Second is the formulate an ICM policy strategy and action plans. This one you have to do it. Thirdly is establishing a coordinating mechanism. Now that is a very important. Who coordinate? So you must have an institutional setup, consists of the top level government official, or sometimes the mayor can be the one that is the chair, and then you have various group of people working together. But there must be a team of core workers, a team of workers that is going to carry out the day-to-day work. That is key. Okay. Next one is that enhancing legislation where there's a necessary. Of course, it will strengthen the enforcement. Now, I can say this now. You can see in the Philippines, many of these local government has already developed their own legislation and they strengthen ICM into their program. So it's no more outside influence program, but it's already inside their own, built into the internal institutional arrangement. So it becomes your project, your problem. Okay, so that is important. And then the next one is promote stakeholders buy-in and participation. And the next one is reducing multiple use conflicts as we go through the process. You cannot solve all the conflicts in one show. Huh? You can solve one by one, but as you solve problem, you go fast. Then sharing of database, that's important. All your information have to be recorded. And creating an informed public. Your public, the communities, should not be a the one that stop your work, right? They should be your co-workers. They should be the one who support you. So you need an informed public. They know exactly what you are doing. If they do not know what you are doing, they'll be very suspicious. So you turn the stakeholders onto your side to work with you. All right. And then you develop capacity through horizontal learning. What I mean horizontal learning means you learn from the field. You learn it. And then financing an ICM program. And this is always a problem that people feel difficult to get funding. But I can assure you, if we do it in this way, you are better off than many other institutions because you can attract funding that way. Both national funding as well as international funding. So one by one, you see the countries that implement ICM and they are able to have a certain sites actually develop certain local government. They gain a lot of funding from the national government as well as international funding. So I think that Xiamen is a very good example. Da Nang and many other places, Philippines, they're also doing very well. So slowly, step by step, you'll be able to attract attention and you attract funding to come along. So monitoring progress and reporting, and the most important is not a one-time deal, it's continual improvement. So this process that you can follow, you will take the ICM cycle and then you go through one step by step to reach there. So there is a way to go there. Next. Okay. This has something to do with what PEMSEA is doing, because PEMSEA is only a project when we first started. All right, 3 years. Then after 3 years, we all gone. Nothing would happen. You see? So if just what I said, if we do an ICM program, just for a short term, you won't see much result. So PEMSEA was very lucky. They was able to continue. Now, how do you make ourselves continue? Now, I want to translate our experience to you so that you would try to implement it from your level of a local government. So when we started at the international level, we only have fixed money for 3 years. And even we delay, we probably get to 4 to 5 years. But still, there is a term when you have to terminate and your staff will go bankrupt, we go somewhere else, then you will lose all your people. But we have to then show to the donors how useful we are. And we have to make sure that the stakeholders, in our case, the stakeholders is the government. The governments are supporting you. They find it's useful. Then you have all this support. We be able to attract the donor to continue funding us. But that is not easy. That will need important people who can sell the project, who are able to convince people, who are far-sighted enough, who are able to be diplomatic enough to talk to people so that they are willing to come in. So we have this extension after the first level from addressing projects on pollution till we move into addressing the next level where we can do ICM practices, and so we can expand ICM. So step by steps over years, we're able to think that if we continue asking for money, we'll never be able to be independent. All right. So over this period of time, the idea of developing a regional mechanism to coordinate all these implementations of the region. We help the region to move forward with the people that are already trained, already have the experience, they will be able to give you more. And on this way, we have to have our own funding. We have to have our own organization. Okay, we cannot be simply reporting to UN agencies. Everything we get guidance from there, but we have to set up our own thinking and build it up. And that is where the concept of partnership in environmental management was established. And finally, we reached a stage that, okay, if we have the concept, we have the institutional arrangement plan, where is the legal personality? Where is it going to be permanent? So we need the government to come out with approval that ICM will have to be a long-term, and PEMSEA should be a long-term organization. With a long-term organization, then you can have more steady funding, you can even ask for more donors for support, then you can be able to go on. Now, the fact that we are able to survive from the beginning when I was there to now, after 30 years, is a great example of this sustainability that has been moving forward. And it is exactly the same approach. We can use it for ICM because you have to move forward on this. And then you will be able to attract funding. But funding is never easy. But it will be something that will lead us to self-sustainability. All right. Now, we will need to do this. We have to have a legal personality. A legal personality, we have to required by international law. 3 countries officially recognizing it. To get the 3 countries officially recognizing it is not easy. You see, there are a lot of efforts to convince the government to give you. But I think actually, eventually we got about 8, I think, to in the first start. Then we get the legal personality. Then we move forward. So now PEMSEA is independent, as an international organization. And I think this is where we are able to sit down here, and I'm lucky to be able to be here to talk to you. And this is where I think the success of setting up something on a long-term thing. I use PEMSEA example to show you that you can reach there, and don't think that, no more money we cannot do. No, we can. Okay, next. Now, before that, here, in order for us to continue, we have to have a long-term plan. Now, this is why we developed the Sustainable Development strategy for the seas of East Asia. You see, so we have a long-term strategy. By implementing the long-term strategy to achieve the goal of sustainable development, we are very, very, very qualified already with experience, with expertise around. Then I think we should be able to reach there. So donor will be more than willing to support an organization like this. All right. And we don't have to go around begging money that often. Okay. Next is we need to now try making an effort to make every country scaling up the ICM practice. Now, so how we do the scaling up? First of all, I think from 1994 to 2007, we only have 2 sites, Xiamen and Da Nang. And up to now, these 2 sites are still operating at different level, of course, but it's okay. They still survive. That means they're still sustained. For 30 years, where do they find money? How do they go on? It must be on their own. All right. Now, next. And then we multiply from the demonstration site to replicating sites. Next, please. Now we see that the number have increased. And you have just heard that PEMSEA has close to 100 over sites. And I'm not sure how much of these sites are really efficient enough. They have developed it, but we still have to go back to see how they can do and how well they perform. But it doesn't matter. The moment they have the will to set it up, they will have to go further. So as you multiply, you will get more and more. Some are successful, some will be weak, but eventually we reach there. Next. Now, the next part of it is that apart from addressing the ICM on the local side, we have these issues of transboundary. You have a cross-boundary thing. You have a river basin, for example. You will have to address this. So you cannot simply tackle ICM from one level. When you are having a river passing by, you have to address the whole river system. So province cooperations will be required. So transboundary cooperation will be required when you do a bigger project. Or if you take Manila Bay, for example, to manage Manila Bay, you will need various local governments to work together. So we need to slowly scaling up into an area to cover the ecosystem much more broadly. So ICM moved from just a local site to a cross-boundary site, and then into the regional site. And then we promote this across the region. Then you have more and more countries operating ICM. And I was told that PEMSEA has achieved 40% of the coastline. And this is very good. But I hope we go and to ensure efficiency. Next. Okay, this is shows 1993 to 2000, the 40% of the coastline has been covered. It's very impressive type of achievements over 30 years. It's not easy, but I think we have to put in more effort to make sure that every site is moving and doing well. Next. Okay, I will talk about the ICM challenges and opportunities. I must confess that what I have given to you does not cover all the issues, because it takes a long time to really, after you set up the institutional arrangement, there's a lot of issues is how do you make it work. So here there is a dynamic, what dynamic do you use will depending on what problems you're facing. Then slowly we can move this towards refinement. Okay, so first challenge is translate donor the UN initiative into national and local agenda. You see, the UN or the donor agencies, they try to implement international convention. They don't care about how their local governments, what you do. All right. So now we have to find a challenge is how do you translate this put together? In other words, what ICM is doing now, you are implementing international convention. And what we are trying to do here is to show to the national government, by implementing the ICM program at a local level, you are actually addressing the UN challenges, then you are implementing them. So the ICM initiative should be considered as an example of national efforts. It's not only local government, it's something that you move forward, because as you expand the ICM activities, you will cover the overall goal. Secondly, it will, of course, very cost-effective measures if we can implement it, and in balancing agency and sector interests and local benefits. I think this is very clear. And thirdly, is creating a national ICM legislative policy. And what we see now, in many of the countries today, they are already establishing ICM policies or establishing ocean policies that can integrate this as a whole. So compared to the time that I was involved, we are very lucky. We already have national government committed to support you. We don't have to go and impress upon the national government anymore. So we have this type of benefits. So in ICM activities, you can help national government to create a national policy. So I think Philippines already in a stage, and China already has a national policy. I think Korea also. Yeah, moving towards that direction. The moment you have this type of policy being developed at national level, implementing ICM becomes very easy. Next one is the changing of attitudes and perceptions of ICMs. See, don't think ICM is a donor-driven project. ICM is local-driven. You are the one who drives the ICM program. Then the transboundary issues I just mentioned, it is an opportunity for us to expand our activities to cover transboundary issues. But without the ICM experience, this becomes very difficult. Next. But this effort of ICM actually also gives you a lot of opportunities, not only challenges. The opportunities here is a foundation that has been laid for implementing and scaling up ICM practices. Once you do it in one area, it becomes experience, and then that will be giving you a foundation for expansion. So secondly is investment opportunities. Having an ICM program, it creates investment opportunities. For example, you want to have environmental pollution problem that you are facing. Now, with an ICM program, donor would like to come in. People know how to put the money in the right spot. So what I'm saying in a short term is that you are creating an investment opportunities for others to come in. Okay, and thirdly is the integration of aid programs. In the past, you have so many USAID project, Japan project, Korea project, China project. All of them want to do their own. But if you can have a program of this nature, it put them all together. All the agencies, all the donor can come in together. It's only through this method it will work. Now, if you compare before 1990s, when we are donor-driven projects, you hardly get into this stage. But when you are moving to after 1990s, we move into this type of ICM approach. Donors begin to get together, and they're willing to share. And then old donors are replaced by new ones. So slowly we are moving forward. So I'm very confident that this approach will actually create more opportunities. Next, please. Okay, my final message is growing economic development requires integrated governance and management. Therefore, increasing decentralization of resource and environmental management can be made possible. Because when you really want to solve the resource and environmental problem, it has to be at the local level. Secondly, is the coastal urbanization issues is getting serious because more and more people now are moving into the coastal area. The population in the coastal area is already very high. Right? Now, with more people moving into it in the future, you'll find that we have a bigger challenge in the coastal urbanization. Now, in this case, we will be able to help solving many of the problems. For example, sand mining. You will not, because of people moving in, build new houses, you start creating. There are a more careful planning can be developed, and so forth. We will be able to reach there on time. Secondly, is that next one is the demand for more effective services in response to threats of the environment will be high. So there will be more funding to support these activities, and safety, health, and properties also being guaranteed, and also realization of benefits of integration and coordination, an essential part of the National Ocean Coastal Policy. So at the end of the day, ICM will drive national and coastal policies. When this coastal policies was established, you have already a full-scale national plan of action to take over. So we are confident that if you go into this scale, you will be able to reach there quite easily. Next, if there's secondly, is ICM system open up a new regime for integrated coastal governance and management. If you skillfully apply and use, we move sustainable development of the coastal and many areas many steps forward. I didn't say that you can reach the goal, but you move many steps forward. Okay, to reach the sustainable development goal is not that easy because you will need to move towards that direction. And over each decade, ICM practice becomes stronger, more robust, more politically accepted and internationally accepted, and at the same time is inclusive and collaborative. So I feel that to close up the presentation, the ICM approach, we have made significant progress, but the key driving force of achieving that is two words. Next, coordination and integration. You see, only if you can coordinate, it's so simple, two words only, coordination and integration, so simple, everybody understand what it is. Very difficult to achieve it. Okay, so this is where the challenges are. And I close it, and I hope that your projects, your activities that you are undertaking will be fruitful. And if you have any questions, I'm willing to answer. Yep.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chua. So in the interest of time, we selected some questions from our online participants. And if you have questions, we will select probably one or two questions from on-site participants. And later, Dr. Chua will be definitely here staying the entire day. So you can approach me if you have questions. So Dr. Chua, we have a question from, I think, one of the former members of technical working group in Guimaras, when we worked with the Guimaras local government, from CPEC. So he wants to ask your thoughts on, unlike other East Asian countries where there is a separate department or ministry covering all mandates on fisheries. Do you think having a Department of Fisheries will improve coordination between agencies to address ICM for a more sustainable coastal resource management in the country?
It's a difficult question. First and foremost, I was a fisheries man before. I worked on fisheries for many years. I was with FAO. So I'm not unfamiliar with these issues. But yes, to develop a Department of Fisheries, it doesn't solve all the problem. It's just giving you an opportunity to concentrate in planning and developing the sector by itself. But the Fisheries Department, we have to have a special role of integrating with the others. If they do it alone, it won't work. It must be able to cooperate with all the other agencies. So integration, coordination is still the answer.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Shirai. I hope that our online participants was able to hear that. Second question, can you share, in your opinion, in your 35 years of work in the region, which country exhibit more successes in terms of best practices on ICM? And what works and what does not work in practical application of ICM so far, based on your experience working with different countries?
And first and foremost, I must say that ICM implementations is not easy. And therefore, the countries who originally accept these ideas and want to implement it, they also confronted with a lot of challenges, especially those people on the ground. And we are dealing with human beings. We're not dealing with certain things, right? We're dealing with human beings. So they have a different type of different countries with different type of thinking. But who comes first? Who can do it more effectively? My own experience is that, and this is where I'm still trying to find out. And you see, when I first started Batangas and Xiamen, I have this idea of Batangas represent a democratic society. Everything is done this way. Xiamen is more of an authoritarian type of approach, where the policies has to come from the top, and if any implementation, just to take these two different type of system. And later on, then I introduced this in Vietnam, where Da Nang is from Vietnam, and then I also implement the projects. I mean, in more authoritative countries, in Singapore, for example. Now, then of course, in a real communist North Korea, I also have a project there, and to see how this can be implemented. But I must say that from Xiamen's and Batangas experience, the Xiamen activity, they reach the goal faster. They because it's quite straightforward, they won't have too much argument. You have the various agencies together, and we have the mayor sitting there, and the mayor will have an important say involving in this. And if we can interact very closely with the mayor and the group, they will be able to listen to it, all right? And then we have the technical team, which is the technical experts in Xiamen being formulated from the university and other research institutions. They become a very important collaborators and provide advice to the government. So in terms of implementing the program per se, the Xiamen come out faster, But when I look at both sides, they are doing equally. Eventually, they reach the same target, all right? And eventually, if Xiamen succeed and Batangas fail, that would be horrible for me, because we did see because of system, or is it because of our approach, But at least we see now they are all succeeding, all in different scale. On the other hand, we see that the one in the North Korea, and I don't know what happened now, but it takes time. They like the idea, but they don't have money. See, central government also have no money. So everything you have to go there and help out. Da Nang, you have a central government support, but they also implement it on their own. And of course, they don't follow all the guidance that we have, but it will take times, because for example, Da Nang is able to move the coastal population along the beach inwards, and then they can develop tourism up there. Now, if you do it in the Philippines, in the democratic countries, it will take years. You will have to convince the local government, to get the stakeholders and the NGOs. So it takes time. But I believe that this system now, to me, operate in both the different type of political setting. But it will work better slowly when this is emerged into the national, into the participant. In the Philippines, for example, when you are getting more convinced with this, now you're multiplying faster than other places. Because you have so many sites are interested, you organize meeting of this nature, you're moving forward. So this is a proof that you can move forward.
I think it's pretty much the same with other issue, how countries in the region are actually differ in terms of level of operation or implementation, but they are actually leaning towards the same target. It depends on the governance and management style of the country.
Sure.
Do we have questions from our on-site participants? Before we go to another or the last question from our online participants. Any question? All right, you have you have time later to interact with Dr. Chua, and we have some questions from online participants that we think is more appropriate. It probably be answered later in our session 2, and some of the questions on the key challenges and opportunities on ICM have been presented already. Probably last question, Dr. Chua. The key actions or key activities that you presented earlier, there are questions on which one do you think is the most important to apply first, or is it necessarily in that chronological order?
Insofar as the actual implementation, I think the process is important. If you don't follow the process, you will probably have to spend more time to go back to square one. For example, you will do a project that is focusing on marine pollution, and you don't have an overall vision, what you want to achieve. And you're only trying to solve the problem of the pollution. But the pollution problem can lead to other problems. Then that is a time when you have difficulties. Then you will have to go back to get the vision first. So I think you still need the vision, because the vision protects you from having a lot of other complications that may come as you implement. And don't forget that when you are successful, you also have enemies. So it will take time, and you have to really move this forward step by step. But the system that we introduce here is something that we help to minimize unnecessary conflicts. So we ask you to integrate first. Why do you integrate? It's a no need integration, I can do it myself. Okay. But the moment you integrate, you reduce the conflict, you increase the cooperation, and then you have the support coming in.
That's, I think, in management, in general management approaches, skipping the process will take longer time, and I agree that it will create more cooperation and more traction among key stakeholders. So no more question. Okay, last call from our participants. No questions. All right, thank you very much, Dr. Chua. Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you very much. So